I think we all have excuses not to do something. And, I was thinking about this today. I was in a seminar about generative AI using artificial intelligence. I've been building a platform for 10 years trying to leverage some of these things. And it's been really interesting um, for me to think about this, that I've been trying to build this thing for so long. And it's been so difficult to get people to even join it, and I've been trying to build it for essentially, I've been trying to build it for people that were, often sort of thinking about that as well, and I wanted to that was the central impetus, was how do I create a platform for non-rejectable research papers and grants? So it became a fun sort of lovely experience rather than this kind of torturous one where we experience a tremendous amount of failure. We go through and we iterate through many different rejections and people don't know why they're rejected. This sort of complicated process that we have in the scientific effort right now. Long story short, it's just interesting to me that we sort of default to I've been building this out for a long time. I think enough people know about it at this moment that I would say that it is kind of there's enough people to know about it. Um, and yet it's so darn hard to get people to join it, to participate, to believe in it. It's not just about, actually building something that matters. It's actually getting people to believe in it, but, even more so just to try it and to experiment and sort of see the potential. I had this very naive view early on, and for a while, right, probably for the first 5 years, where I just built this, everybody's gonna be like, "Hey, this is fantastic." There would be, sort of communal help. Um, I've since learned that's not how the world works. It's hard enough just getting people to actually look at the thing or join the thing than it is to get people to sort of commit in any very dedicated way. And I think, beginning with where I began with, we all kind of have our own excuses on why that actually is the case. We sort of think that um, that our lives are too busy. We can't sort of join on to something. And, it's fascinating because one of the hardest, and I've had this conversation, um, several times before, it requires very little commitment, very little interest. Um, that the sort of surface value of it, the sort of like this you'd think it would be easy to sort of motivate people to go on to something where they would probably get more value from that, or at least try to support it in various different ways. Um, by just referring people to something, to the platform, and yet it's very difficult. This is where I want to get to, is that it's very difficult for most people to see that. I mean, and a lot of it comes down to, issues of trust. Am I going to scam people? A lot of it comes down to having it interesting enough that people will, you know, not only believe in it, but sort of just mention it in conversation to passing. Did you know that this person's doing this? Um, you know, and on top of it, it has to be, I do believe in the sociology of science. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in terms of, things like credibility, things like, your stature, status, and all of those kind of things. I do really strongly believe in those effects. Um, that is all about the sociology of how things actually work, because we're human beings. We have limited amount of resources as humans, and we sort of justify things in our heads in a very human way and why we actually do things. Um, so I do believe in those things, and that's what sort of makes it more challenging, right? So my job as the innovator or entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it, um, is to figure out how to navigate these challenges. It's not necessarily, and this is where I want to come back to, it's not necessarily that people have these concerns or these excuses or whatever that is actually the problem. The problem is my problem. The problem is, how do I navigate that when that is what people often default to. So it's not on, and I'm not, in one sense, I do have a sense of frustration. It's like, why is, like, why? Um, but but on the other hand, that the sense of frustration is my increasing more impotence, and why I actually want to do this is that there are these sort of challenges. If it's difficult for me, that's why I always default to. I'm an engineer trained at one of the best schools in Canada for both business and as well as engineering, and perhaps in the world, some of the best schools. I can't imagine other people that don't have um, that privilege, right? And being part of that becomes an interesting problem. Is, how do I deal with this? How do I navigate this and position and think about, how it is to sort of transform this so that people want to participate? And, instead of the default is I'm too busy, or any of those number of defaults that we have, or, I never heard of it or whatever, right? Like all these kind of things. Um, how do I create it so it becomes part of the conversation? And that is a more challenging thing. And I think that's quintessentially what entrepreneurship, what innovation is trying to figure out how to position these things so it becomes part of the conversation, and changing things so it actually is the conversation. And I think that that is a deeper, more profound thing that's a lot more interesting than simply sort of giving up and being frustrated with the fact that, people have all of these excuses, which, are often real, which they're often sort of true in the sense of, like, for individual people. Um, but collectively, it becomes very difficult to do anything that's entrepreneurial or innovative. Um, and I think it's actually stronger. It's a stronger force because people have these perceived beliefs in their heads that are actually quite stronger in the academic scientific community. Um, in the sense that they have much more stronger beliefs about what the actual world is, and sort of feelings of less time, um, time pressure. So, long story short, all of these excuses that people have are actually legitimate excuses that I think are that make it difficult for people to be entrepreneurial or innovative. But at the same time, it is not their job to deal with it. It's my job. And my job is the one that has to figure out how to navigate this so that I can actually build this thing and make it actually work. All right. Take care. Have a wonderful day.